How about a little Hot Take Friday? Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Glacial Geek video. I would say deep thoughts, thin coats, but this is more like hot takes, no coats. But welcome to the video. A big thing happened if you're watching this when it came out yesterday. So the new Balance Dataslate, this new endeavor that GW is doing with 40K to find some balance with the more competitive aspects of the game, has been released. Which addressed the issues that had been arising with Tau and Custodes, and especially Harlequins recently with the tournament scene that has been going on. But in so doing, they've also addressed a lot of issues that other armies have had with the fact that they have been falling off in competitiveness and they just couldn't keep up with all of the new stuff that's coming out. This does require a lot of thinking about them. There's some that are pretty obvious that were very, very easy to identify and that we knew were coming. They had to address the fact that 9 Skyweavers were just dominating the entire tournament scene. There was issues with the fact that Tau and Custodes, before the Harlequins came out, were just dominating the tournament scene, and it was the 2 of them until the 3rd came in and then just totally dominated all of them. And I think that they addressed all of the issues. They addressed many of the issues. You know, I'm not going to say it's perfect because I don't think anything's perfect. I think that they addressed them in a measured way so that all 3 of them are still competitive, and all 3 of them you will still see placing top level in the tournament scene. At the end of the day, what you're trying to do with something like this is not to just nerf into oblivion the army. You want to get them to a point where they're going to be good and they're going to be competitive and that they can keep playing in the scene while not being dominant and just unfun for everyone else to play against. And I think that they successfully did so. You know, you could argue that maybe Tau needed some more. They didn't really address crisis suits as much. I think Mont Ka being addressed was going to be helpful, certainly. I think that the Custodes got hit pretty hard. You know, I think taking away OBSEC from all of the infantry and just putting on troops again when the troops were not really a major component of armies that were being put out makes a big difference in gameplay and how you go about it, especially now that their AP against other power armored stuff is not going to be as helpful. We'll get to that in a bit. But I think that they addressed it in a way that does not destroy Custodes. I think it was tough on them. You know, I think that they're going to be in a harder place, obviously, than they were before this balance sheet, but I still think that you're going to see them performing well going forward. And then the Harlequins had some of their main issues addressed. So if you look at it, 40-point increase on Void Weavers is a huge increase in points for a model. They didn't reduce their numbers like the orcs had with their buggies, and I think that this was in large part for that to the fact that, as some of my friends had pointed out, that they don't really have many options for anti-tank weapons other than the Void Weavers. They've got such a small line that if you start restricting the numbers that you can take of each of them below what the normal game mechanics require, then you start to run into a place where they don't have any models to play the game and to be able to be fielded on the table. So when you see something like that, you understand that maybe what they wanted to do is reduce the numbers but not have it so that you can't take them if you think you need them in your list. So technically 9 Void Weavers are still doable and you can still take them, but at 40-point increase per, that's, you're looking at like almost another quarter, over a quarter of your, or close to a quarter of a 2,000-point list increase in prices there that you're looking at. And it's going to be tough to fit all of those in there. And once you start to reduce the numbers that can go in, I think that you do a good job of making it so that they can be usable as a faction, but not be as oppressive as it looked like they were doing in the tournament scene. And this is the kind of thing that you kind of expect from the Balance Data Sheet. This is the kind of thing that they've done in the past. This is what they've done with basically a lot of the times. Whether you had it with the Drukar, you had it with the Admech, when they were just like, which is the start of the Balance Data Sheet, the data slates, was during those, when those 2 armies were just being overly dominant in the competitive scene, and it became unfun to play against them. And they were addressed with the data slate. And I think that's what the Balance Data Slate is meant to be, is a way to try to adjust the power levels that you see some of these armies have in a competitive scene. So honestly, if you are just playing with your friends and you're just having fun at home, you can take and leave whatever you want. Like if you just don't think that that's going to be fun, if your friend only has 9 Void Weavers and you didn't have a problem playing against them, then sure, go ahead, let them take it. Or same thing with the orcs. Orcs got hurt with the buggies long ago. But if your friend only has the orc buggies and wants to keep playing with them, there's no reason that you can't do it at home. A lot of this balanced data slate is meant to address issues that people are going to be facing in a more competitive scene, and a scene where people are going to be, so not necessarily top table at LVO, but in a local tournament or at a game night that you go to, that people are bringing their hard lists. Because if anyone's showing up with 9 Void Weavers, they're not there for just a friendly, fun game. They're there for a reason. And they're looking to win. And I think that this kind of balance to it is going to help those kind of situations. So, again, if you're just playing with your friends, you can internally balance yourselves, and you can understand that it's not a fun list to play against, and you can ask your friend not to do so. And if they refuse, then at that point, you come to some understandings about what's going on with that friendship. Or you just say, okay, then we're just going to play by the rules as written now by GW, and we're going to go with the balanced data slate, and you're going to have to pay more points for them. And I think that's the beauty of having this kind of data slate, is that for people who don't need to be told what they can and cannot do by GW, it makes zero difference to your day, and it makes zero difference to your game. It makes zero difference to what you're doing, because you can take and leave everything that you want and just use what you think is best and move on from there. But if you're in a situation where that doesn't work, that you can't come to a mutual understanding, or everyone is just trying to, beat each other up because that's what you're looking to do, like in a competitive tournament scene, then this is what the data slate's there for, to address it. So if you think it's ruining your beer and pretzels game on a Thursday night, then you just need to talk to your friend that you're playing with and figure out what is working and what doesn't work for you guys, and what's ruining the fun in your opinion and what's not. But if you are going to a tournament where you can't have that kind of conversation, where it has to be kind of black and white what's being said, then at that point they're doing what they need to make that kind of situation possible. In that regard, in addressing the big boogeymen on the scene in these kind of competitive situations, I think it was a flying success. I think that they adjusted them appropriately, measuredly, and without really making them useless. I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to bemoan the fact that they went out and bought 9 Void Weavers and now they're not going to be able to fit that into a 2,000 point list. Or there's going to be people that are going to bemoan the fact that they can no longer just go into a tournament and expect to win because they've got the broadsides that needed that core buff for them. Okay, I mean, you can complain all you want, but I think it was pretty evident to everybody who was not benefiting from the imbalance there that something needed to be done and something needed to be addressed in the competitive scene. And this did so, and I think did so in a measured way that is going to be helpful for the game and says something to how things are going to be going forward. I think you're always going to have situations where you have these like when new codexes come out, I think GW, especially with this edition, is trying new things. They're trying to kind of step outside the box and try something new and try something different, and try to adjust to try to change different things. Where in previous editions it was kind of they just adjusted toughness and they adjusted strength and they adjusted kind of things like that. They've been taking some steps outside of their usual bounds of action to try to make the game more interesting. Try to find different places where they can innovate in the game system to make it fun for everyone that's playing and make it interesting. And I think you look at something like the Genestealer Cult Codex that they started with the 8th edition one and now into the 9th edition one. They're trying some new things, and they're trying something which is, I think, super exciting and new and invigorating when you have this kind of book that's written. And I think they're trying to do the same thing. And I think with Genestealer Cult, they did a good job of finding that balance within the book. And I think other times they, err a bit. And that's what this balanced data slate is meant to do, is to find those things that in a void, just in their writing room, when they're making these rules, don't seem apparent to them. But once you release it to millions upon millions of people, especially some of them that are out there specifically looking to break the system and break the game to their benefit, things are going to arise. And that's what this balanced data slate is meant to do, and that's what it's done previously, and that's what it's doing now with this. And I think that's great. But they also took some other steps, not just addressing the boogeymen with this, that I think is very interesting and is maybe speaks to something that'll be interesting going forward with these kind of things, is that they made some balances to buff some hurting armies and to adjust some things globally within the system that I think needed adjusting, and that I think they've done so successfully. One of the things that they did was they adjusted the universal use of indirect fire. So anything that doesn't require line of sight to shoot, they made an adjustment now where you are -1 to shoot if you cannot draw a line of sight, even if you can, and your opponent gets +1 to their save if they're shooting from something from there. I guess to account for the fact that you're kind of lobbing it up and over, they can hear the bombs coming. It gives them a chance to react to it and look for cover, which I think is interesting. And I think it's the fact is that indirect fire was a huge boogeyman in the system. And anytime you saw these armies, and you saw it with Tyranids previously when you had the Hive Guard, anytime you had something that was very effective with out of line of sight firing, it became something that needed to be looked at, and it was very, very strong. And it became hard to balance that out of line of sight shooting with points that you're trying to make with something. So trying to adjust these units' points with out of line of sight shooting, which is kind of like a nebulous thing, became difficult. And I think that adjusting this to make it so that there are penalties for using the out of line of sight blocking makes it, in my opinion, the way to go forward with this. Where previously there was no downside to just hiding this unit that can shoot out of line of sight behind a building so that nothing else can interact with it until they got really close to it. Now there is a reason to kind of maybe you want to get out there to get some line of sight. And what that does is increases interactability. And I think that they've done that a lot and made that a focus of this. They didn't like units that wouldn't let you interact with each other. So that's why they adjusted the way that the Tabaxi worked for the AdMech, was that they wanted you to be able to interact back and forth, that there was some risk to doing what you were doing. And in this case, they've done so with all line of sight shooting, which I think is wonderful. And I think it's going to be a benefit for the game and the system going forward. And it'll be interesting to see how that all pans out. But in doing so, they also realized that this was going to majorly hurt a faction, the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard, in ways that they just don't need to be nerfed right now. They're hurting real bad. They're not doing super great in the out there in the meta. So they made them immune to this. So they made it so that it doesn't affect their out of line of sight shooting, because it was a major component of anything that kept them in the game right now. And I think it was a good idea to do so, to keep it in mind, because as they shown, they took out the information about the Imperial Knights and the Chaos Knights from the data slate that they had gotten previously, under the expectation that they're going to get their book very soon. So I think in showing this, they know that Guard are not going to get theirs as soon as the Knights are, so that it needs to be adjusted in a way that allows them to keep playing until they do get their new book. And by making them immune to that, I think was beautiful. And I think it was a good way to keep them going and allow Guard to keep doing their things. And on top of that, they thought they needed an extra boost, and they gave them the fact that now all regiment units, which means that you're not going to get it on your Scions, you're not going to get it on your Ogren, your Bulgren, but you will get it on everything else. Now, unmodified hit rolls of 6, auto wound, which is great, because I think that they've got a whole lot of very low strength shooting. They've got a lot of high number of shots, like with your las guns and stuff like that. And allowing them to just auto wound will hopefully allow them to match a lot of the new sweetness that you've got in a lot of these new books that have come out since theirs came out last edition. So they're still behind the 8 ball at this point, but that kind of gives them a little bit of a boost without breaking them entirely, and allows them to compete with everything else that's going out there. And they made it so that weapons and stuff like special weapons on Guard units are now free, so you can take them as well, which is great. A slight increase in the unit cost, but now also making it so that you can take everything with a melta-gun and a mortar team and a las cannon and all this fun stuff that you can get with it without having to pay for it extra. Just gives them some extra shots, gives them some extra quality shooting as well, and keeps them in there. Because at this point, Guard are not going to break the meta. They're not going to suddenly come up and just dominate with these bonuses. What they do is that they allow Guard players to enjoy the game and keep playing until they get their new book, which I think is good. And another thing that they did with the same idea towards all of this, and units and stuff that aren't performing to where they feel that they ought to for players, they've given basically power armor units armor. What is it? Armor of Contempt, which basically means that you can ignore an AP. You reduce their AP by 1. So if someone shoots you with an AP -3 weapon, it's actually going to be considered an AP -2. So it's almost like giving them an extra boost of their armor, but it's not affected by AP 0 weapons. So, which I think is great. I think it speaks more to the lore of what these power armor units were doing. I think that power armored armies were faring worse off than a lot of the other armies that are out there. Like, you didn't see Space Marines, you don't see Chaos Space Marines, you don't see the doing as well up there. Sisters had been doing well for a while, but they got outclassed by the big boys that came in, like Tau, like Custodes, like the Harlequins. And this hopefully will give them a boost to get back into the mix, into the fight, which I think is great, and I like it. By doing so, they've shown that they are willing to step outside of their usual realm, like I was saying that they've been doing with a lot of the other codex and stuff like that, outside of the realm of the normal things that you would think of. So they could have just dropped points for everything and just, you've had more Space Marines out there, which is boring and hard to keep under control and keep balance, and it's hard to do that. While you do something like this, it keeps the number of models on the table the same, which is something that I think they've been looking to keep consistent throughout this edition. And what it allows you to do is it allows them to stick around for a lot longer and allows them to perform better and keep in the fight with all of these big new nasties that have come out since they came out as one of the first codexes to come out in this edition, with Space Marines in particular. But also looking at it as well with the Sisters, that they quickly fell off the curve because of everything that changed. They also changed how Bodyguard works. So suddenly my Deathwing command squad cannot protect my Talon Masters behind a wall with them being up front, which, to be fair, is good. I think it's a good change to the system. I did it because that's what it was good to do for competitive scene. I wouldn't do it against, in a super friendly, narrative game. And I think you saw the same thing with the Sisters. Now their characters are going to have to hang back a little bit with their units. So now basically Bodyguard allows them to provide Lookout Sir even if they have less than the 3 models that would normally be allowed. So I can still take a 2-man command squad and still give the benefit of Lookout Sir, but they've still got to follow all the same rules, which is good. And I think it also allows sniper units to get back into the game to do their thing, because previously it was like everyone was getting some kind of bodyguard and you couldn't target them at all. And sniper units just didn't serve any purpose anymore, since all the models that you would want to shoot with a sniper unit were protected by a bodyguard that made it impossible to shoot them. So these changes, I think, illustrate that GW is listening, that they are looking, and that they are aware of what's going on. Previous editions, we had it where nothing would happen. So they would have put out a book as hard to handle as the Harlequins and been like, good luck, we'll see you in 5 years when we when we update their book and change it. And then usually what would happen is that they would change it to something horribly underpowered, and you would have to deal with that for another 5 years as you put your army up on the shelf. That swinging back and forth became very difficult and became got to the point that that's why ITC was created, because they were like, this is ridiculous that you are just leaving these situations unhandled, unaddressed, and you're leaving in this balance that just doesn't work for anybody. And by having this balanced data slate, by having the FAQs, by having the chapter approved changes in points and in the missions, it shows that they are listening to the players, that they are aware of what's going on in the gaming world, and that they want to make these adjustments to make the game more fun and interesting for people to play. I don't think it takes a genius to have seen that things were starting to bog down a bit, and I think that especially in the competitive scene, since the Tau started coming out, when you had Tau or Custodes, I guess about the same time, with the advent of the Tau and the Custodes, and then with the Harlequins, it became oppressive, and people were not happy to see the same army 5 times in the top 8, or see the same basically the same 2 lists fighting it out for top table. It becomes hard to want to get into all of that and face all of that if you don't have one of those. And by making these adjustments, by making these changes, they've shown that GW is listening, seeing that, and realized that it wasn't going to be fun for a lot of people for a while there. So by making these changes, I think it's fun again. You're always going to hear people complaining. You're always going to hear people that aren't happy with the changes, that they should have been hit harder, or they got hit too hard, and it's like, rip my army, it's not going to can't do anything anymore, it's garbage, I may as well just toss them. Yeah, I mean, you were going to get that no matter what happens. You're going to get that from every single person. I've heard it about every single army that gets adjusted. And I've heard every army called broken. I've seen every army called unusable. And at the end of the day, if you don't win with it, doesn't make it broken. If you're seeing just an oppressive situation, then it becomes it. So, for instance, when I played against the orc buggy list back before the Balance Dataslate took care of that, it was oppressive to play. It just was not fun to play. It became hard to handle, and there was no interaction. It was just dominant and rolled over you, and there was nothing you could do about it, and it was unfun to face. And I think that I never actually got to face the 9 Void Weaver thing. Fully. The 9 Void Weaver list that was coming out with the Harlequins. But I could see how that's the same way, that people would see it, face it, and just be like, there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing I can do to address it, you know? And it just became unfun to play against. And that has been the thing that GW has been addressing and directly taking actions against, is those situations that were unfun to play against. Not the things that won, not the things that do well, not the things that work well, not the things that are, you know, interesting and cool. They address the things that are unfun to play against. So Buggy List was oppressive to play against, and they adjusted it and they addressed it, and it became now where, you know, orcs are doing orc things. Because it was just unfun to play against, and that needed to be addressed. Same thing now with Custodes, where you have the one banner character that's sitting on that objective. You got him surrounded by a whole bunch of other, you know, a bunch of your army. Doesn't matter. He's OBSEC. He's got that now. And it's like, all right, well, that's, you know, fun for everybody, you know. And they make that adjustment. They were doing to the point that it became hard to want to play against them, you know. And the same thing with the Harlequins, where it's like you run into it and you're like, well, okay, well, I guess I lose, you know, GG. There's nothing I can do about this. And they adjusted. And I think Bodyguard was causing the same kind of issues with people, was making issues with people's ability to have fun with the game. And they've addressed it. And each step of the way, they've taken those things that people have universally found unfun to play against and addressed them. And I think that's wonderful. And I think that shows good promise for what's going forward. Do I think that GW will be the most balanced game that's ever been created? Like Warhammer is going to be the most balanced game that's ever been created going forward? No. I think you're still going to have something that comes out. We'll see what happens with Tyranids. They don't feel quite as oppressive as, you know, some of the other stuff that I've played against. But I could be shown wrong. Who knows what's going to happen once that book comes out? Or maybe Knights will come along and stomp the crap out of everything and just become unfair and unfun to play against. And I've got all the faith, though, that if that is to occur, that GW will put something out to address it and make it so that you can go out and play and have fun. I'm very excited to get my Marines back out there and see what's going on. It's going to take some adjusting. It's going to take some changes. To see what weapons to put on them, some adjustments to how I play with the different units. You know, maybe I don't take command squads anymore because, you know, what's the point of taking them if they're not going to do that one particular thing that they did very well for me? And that's interesting and fun, in my opinion, when you have these kind of shakeups that make you rethink things, that you don't just have the same list going forward every single time, and that it makes you want to try different stuff. So I think it'll be interesting to see how this all shakes out. I'm very interested to see what happens, kind of the first tournaments that come out after this, the big ones that come out after this, and see how everything kind of pans out with the competitive scene, because it was kind of in a turmoil here for a while, for a couple of months, and I think it'll be, I think this Balanced Dataslate addressed the main boogeymen, the main problems, and then did some good thinking outside the box to try to help some factions that kind of needed a little bit of a boost up. So, let me know what you think. Do you think that the Nerf hammer came down too hard? Do you think that the Nerf hammer did not come hard enough? Do you think that this is going to change anything? Do you think it's not going to change anything? Let me know down below what you think. If you agree with me, if you disagree with me, we can have a conversation about it. And just let me know what's happening. So, things are changing, yes, and you have to get used to it. And I think that if you have a game like this that is meant to be competitive in that it's played between two factions, and you want to have it kind of as a growing thing that's always going to have things coming out, new models, new rules, then it's kind of what has to happen. And if you don't want to face that, then you can pick and choose the point in time at which you want to pause it and go with it. Or, you know, that's just kind of the reality of what this game is going to be. And this is kind of the reality of what this game has always been. They've just increased the interactability. I think they've had and expanded things so that it, whereas previously you had to buy the one book every 5 years and then just be pissed at it for 5 years. Now they're coming out with books a little bit faster than that, and you gotta try to keep up with it if you want to be competitive. And if you don't want to be competitive, then just play whatever game you want to play. That's what it comes down to. Because if you're upset at having to keep up with things, then you don't keep up with things, is what it comes down to. Because I've said it before, and I'll say it again, and I will always keep saying it. This hobby has to be something for you, and has to be something that you want to do, and it has to be for you and about you. And if you're not happy with it, do something about that. Be the change that you want to see changed. So if you and your friends don't like to have to keep up with things, then don't. But if you and your friends do want to keep up with things, then do. And do it in a way that's going to be helpful and fun for you and everyone around you. So the only time that you're ever going to have to keep up with everything that GW keeps putting out and doing is if you want to play in a competitive scene. And that's a choice in and of itself. I think it's a good thing, and I think it shows a lot of potential for the future in ways that they can think outside the box. So, I hope you all have enjoyed this. I certainly have. I have been Phil, the Glacial Geek, as always. And until next time, stay safe and have fun.